Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by littleshaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. Today I want to talk to you about how narcissists treat their children. This is a topic that is very important to many people, so I thought we could talk about it on the show today. Pathologically narcissistic people are generally disastrous parents. There's just no other way to say it. This type of personality was not designed to be a caretaker. The needs of other people don't matter to them, and the feelings of others are non-existent. They are callous, selfish, cruel, and indifferent. Children raised by narcissistic parents are haunted by the idea that they're not good enough and that they must be perfect in order to be loved. They are plagued by the idea that people will abandon them and that nobody can be trusted. They are allowed no security, no safety, and no boundaries. They are simply tools for the narcissistic parent to use in whatever manner they deem necessary. How the narcissistic parent treats the child or children depends on what they're using the child for. For example, children that exist to showcase what a wonderful parent the narcissist is will often seem to be treated very well in public or in front of people, and there will be a huge amount of pressure on these children to perform perfectly in front of others. Performing badly or making mistakes will usually be taken very personally by the narcissist, and the child is often accused of embarrassing the narcissistic parent on purpose. Children that exist to provide unconditional love and acceptance to the narcissistic parent are treated like dolls on a shelf to be used only when the narcissist needs them and ignored the rest of the time. Children that are used to punish other people are told terrible things about the other person and encouraged to hate or mistreat the other person, or used as pawns in the game that the narcissist is playing with no thought to how this affects the child or anything else. Most children perform all of these functions, and others as well, all in the service of the narcissistic person's ego. The child's needs, personality, and identity are often ruthlessly stomped out in an attempt to replace it with the narcissist's own. The child is not allowed to have boundaries or to be their own person in any way. They exist only to service the narcissistic parent's ego, and they have no other use. This applies to spoiling the child too, by the way. Children are usually spoiled for the same reason they're beaten, because the parent has a need that they are satisfying by using the child to do so, and it cannot be said enough that spoiling a child is abuse. Narcissistic parents in particular may alternately spoil and ignore a child, which can leave the child unable to ascertain what behavior is appropriate. It can leave them with difficulty understanding consequences, feelings, or how to relate to other people because the reactions they receive are wildly inconsistent. Now, it's not uncommon to hear people say things like, "My wife was a wonderful mother at first," or "My brother was good to his kids when they were babies." This happens because it's easy for a pathologically narcissistic person to have positive feelings for something or someone that does not challenge them, threaten, or contradict them, for something that cannot reject or abandon them. This is why many narcissistic people seem to have positive feelings for animals, for instance. Children are easy to control. Animals are easy to control. They don't assert their own needs in a threatening way, and for a time they'll love you unconditionally no matter what you do to them. When the child gets older and starts to assert their independence and their individuality, or they start challenging the narcissistic parent, this will often change. The parent feels rejected by the child and offended by the child's individuality. If they blame the other parent for this, they will often accuse the parent of turning the child against them somehow. Then they will often do what they can to control the child and try to turn the child against the other parent in the misguided and toxic belief that they will win the competition they believe they're in for the child's love and admiration. If they blame the child for this, they will often shame, humiliate, and abuse the child as punishment. This can be devastating to a child, especially because sometimes this happens when the child is still a toddler or very young. Then the child, who is still little more than a baby, is used to all the parents' attention and love, but now gets ignored, pushed away, and denied. I remember a situation with a narcissistic mother who always said she loved babies, and she had one every 2 years or so until she had 5 children. Without fail, the child that was around 2 years old was emotionally abandoned immediately for the new baby. Like literally, all the attention was focused on the current 2-year-old until the very day that whatever new baby was born, and then the 2-year-old was pushed out and ignored along with the rest of the older children who had to take care of themselves while the mother spent all her time shut in a room with her new baby. As you would expect, none of those children ever really emotionally recovered from that horrific abandonment. And how could they? The golden child and scapegoat dynamic often comes into play around the time independence shows up if there's more than one child, with the less difficult or less disappointing child being cast as the golden child. This is the child chosen to represent the narcissistic person's triumphs and successes. This child often seems to be treated very well. The child that is more difficult or disappointing somehow will often be cast as the scapegoat. This is the child that's forced to take the blame for everything that goes wrong. This child is generally treated very badly, sometimes by the entire family at the narcissistic parent's direction. If there's only one child, then that child will be subjected to both of these sets of expectations or types of treatment. It's important to remember, too, that a narcissist can feel rejected by the child at any time, even when the child's a baby. The child doesn't have to be older for this to happen. A baby that cries too much or needs too much can inspire resentment and rejection from a narcissistic parent. A narcissistic parent, for example, that pictured themselves angelically rocking their sweet bundle to sleep to the adoration of all the other people can be very upset and disappointed in a screaming, shrieking, needing baby that does not love them as they imagined the baby would. There's also the issue that narcissistic parents often do not understand that there's a difference between themselves and a child, regardless of the child's age. They may compare themselves to children, even very young children, and say things like, it isn't fair that the 3-year-old doesn't get yelled at for being careless, but they do. Or that the 4-year-old gets more consideration than they do. Or that you're treating the 10-year-old better than you treat them. They often don't seem to understand that the expectations for adults and children are different. They may believe they're being treated unfairly because of this, or they may expect children to behave like little adults and punish them if they do not do so. This is the kind of thing that really makes people wonder if there is something wrong with this person, and the answer is yes, there is. When there's a narcissistic parent, the child will never matter any more than the narcissist wants them to matter. They are inconsequential if the narcissist needs something that does not involve them. If children are considered to be in the way by a narcissistic parent, they can even be in danger. Consider the cases of Susan Smith and Diane Downs, who killed their children because they believed the children were preventing relationships with the men they wanted to date. Consider the unborn child of Scott Peterson, who was killed because he wanted to be rid of his wife and didn't want to be bothered with the way a child would complicate that. Consider the words of Casey Anthony, who faced trial for the murder of her 2-year-old daughter Kaylee. While in jail, Casey was recorded speaking to someone who was trying to reassure her that her friends and family were on her side. Casey's words were, "No, they're not. They just want Kaylee back. That's all they're worried about is getting Kaylee back." Anyone interested in a very clear portrait of a pathologically narcissistic person should look into that case, by the way. Casey Anthony is a textbook example of a pathologically narcissistic person. She's also a pathological liar. In the end, sad as it is, the way narcissistic people relate to children is no different than how they relate to anybody else. Their children exist to fulfill their needs and for nothing else. If the child does not succeed in this task or have needs of their own that the narcissist is threatened by, they will be abused, punished, and even discarded by the narcissist without a second thought. No one is safe from a pathologically narcissistic person. They are disastrous parents and abusive, neglectful caretakers. I hope this clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online or over the phone, so if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org and click the bookings tab to go ahead and do that, or you can follow the link in the information section for this video. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by littleshaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you and have a wonderful day.